and welcome to the show. I am here today on BeamNG Drive with a vehicle that I made. This is the FRM Dragon, a car that we built on a stream a little while ago. We built it on automation and have since ported it over to Beam, and I have to say this is probably the car I am most proud of building. Now, I've built various vehicles on automation. Some of them have actually turned out to be not too bad, but this one might well be my favourite. First of all, it's a shooting brake, which is glorious. It's one of the newer body styles. I can't say I've come across this one before. Second of all, the engine is quite impressive that goes on in this. I was tasked with building a torque monster of a car because it's easy to kind of go crazy high revs and crazy high horsepower, but I tend not to end up building cars with all that much torque. And this thing is, shall we say, different to what I would normally build. It has a 9.5 litre V10 in the front, which is good for about 800 torque and about 820 horsepower. It's bonkers. It is essentially a shooting brake version of a Viper. Well, my attempt at a shooting brake competitor for a Viper, and I, really like it. I am, for once, relatively happy with the way a car looks from just about every angle. I've built some cars I kind of like the look of from the front or like the back, but yeah, this one, overall, I am pretty damn happy with. And the thing is, while it is, on the most part, fairly good in terms of automation specs, it does have some problems. First of all, that the ABS is going to have to come off the car. It seems to be doing the thing of go on the brakes and the ABS just means it doesn't stop, so that's something. Now, I have turned the traction control off because if you leave it on, there's so much power and torque going on in the car that it doesn't really know what to do and doesn't really go anywhere. However, that does mean that it is now one of the lairiest things I've ever driven. It doesn't go in a straight line at all if you use a modicum of throttle. It really wants to slide around. There is not very much grip in this car whatsoever, and if the ABS isn't giving the car issues with just simply getting stopped, the brakes overheat. So while at that time there it got stopped relatively okay, while the brakes might seem good or good enough when it comes to automation, I've binned my lovely car twice now. The brakes might seem like they are fairly good in automation land when put into Beam. We could probably do with some work. So this is what the car is like. This is the handling course from the automation test track map. This is what my car is like now. What I am going to do is head back to automation, and while keeping the engine exactly the same, we're not going to change the engine. I love the engine. It's stupid and shouldn't work, but it does. We're going to try and make this car just a little bit more controllable when it comes to Beam. So, I headed over to automation to try and figure out what I was going to do with the car. First of all, we get rid of all the assists. Now, while that makes it slightly more difficult to sell in automation world, they don't always translate so well into Beam, especially with the big, wonky, crazy cars that I sometimes end up building. So, we'll get rid of them for now. The brakes were going to be increased. We want, some fairly sizable brakes. It's a fast, heavy car. Brakes are relatively important. I love that the off-road stat went up by increasing the rear, not by much, but increasing the rear brakes, but apparently it does for reasons. The biggest difference, and probably the most important difference, was the tyres. Now, the car was running on sports compound tyres, which is perfectly reasonable when it comes to automation, but when translated into Beam, anything other than the semi-slicks just generally struggle with grip. And again, sensible sports cars can struggle with grip on anything other than semi-slicks. So, yeah, that was probably the more sensible idea to go for on the car, especially as such weight and power, you're kind of going to need it. Now, I did start having a little bit of a tinker around with the suspension tuning. Once upon a time, I knew what I was doing with this, but it was a very, very long time ago, and I now don't really. I gave it a bit more rear camber and kind of called it a day. The other thing that I wanted to do was, well, I say I wanted to do, I didn't actually want to have a wing on the back of this car, and I know that's a very, very rare thing. I know that's a very rare thing for me to say, but I wanted some downforce. Well, I didn't actually want the look of a wing because I loved the way the car looked as it was. Downforce is very much a thing. Downforce is very much an important part of the cars, if you like, or can be. However, there's a problem. The body style here doesn't really work with the kind of supplied options, shall we say. I didn't want a big, mighty, sticky outy wing on this car. I was trying to go for kind of like a little lip roof spoiler, because while, yes, in reality, how the air flows over those will be a lot less effective than the massive, giant, full-on wings. In Beam, I believe, at least as far as I'm aware, it's the same between this style of wing, the massive time attack wings, or whatever basically is a surface that can be used for creating downforce. So they all get the same amount of options, basically. I was just trying to find one that didn't look completely terrible, and that was proving difficult. Because of the shape of the body, there's nowhere to really put a wing on the car. So any of these sort of freestanding wings don't really work. Any of the kind of lip spoilers that would be good also don't really work. I wondered whether you could get away with having one. Couldn't really get one on the top anywhere. I wondered if I could get away with having it at the lower level, because it's kind of just that tiniest little bit of a lip around, kind of below the rear windscreen. But I couldn't get anything to place on there either. There are stacks of options, and I have to say, since I last played this game, there are so many options now in terms of spoilers, in terms of full-on wings, some crazy, crazy wings if you want to go absolutely bonkers with cars, which is always fun. But none were really working. Went for like a handle style approach, but even that doesn't look right, and then you can't really put it in the right places to get it to sit right. And that was a little bit of a problem. I actually tried using... So I tried using what would be like a front lip. So these would normally go around your front bumper. Again, they will give you sort of front downforce, if you will. I tried putting them on the back, but that didn't work. After faffing around with a whole bunch, I kind of started to get close to an idea, but it kind of glitched out basically with what I was trying to get it to do. It wasn't happy with placing it here. And then I had to accept a little bit of cheating. I did get a little bit sneaky with this one. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, if you were designing a car, you would be able to design whatever you wanted. This trying to work with how the fixtures want to fix onto the body, I couldn't get it to fix where I wanted it to, basically. So I went a little bit kind of meta on this one. The idea is that it doesn't matter about the size of the wing here, just that there is that entity on the car. So if I make it... Well, at this point, I was trying to get it to kind of blend in with the bodywork by making it tiny, but I then settled for, rather than doing that, just hide it. Just have this tiny little square of a wing, make it the smallest thing possible, and then hide it behind a light. Cheating a little bit, yes. Yes, it was. I very much like the look of this car, and I just didn't want to ruin it with a massive stupid wing on the top of it. So what we did was hide the tiny wing and still give us the downforce, because I couldn't put the lip where I wanted it to on the car, so we hid it behind a brake light. Did the trick, you know. Did the trick, and then we went into here, and then I whacked up the downforce to hopefully give it some stability. Because that was the plan. At the end of the day, that was what I wanted to do. We wanted to give it some downforce. We wanted to try and give it some sort of control. When it came to the faster corners, we'd already seen the car be quite a difficult beast to drive, so I figured the tyres, the wing were a way to go if I wasn't going to be allowing myself to make it all-wheel drive. And then the other thing, of course, having done that, we're going to do a front lip as well on the car. Now this, easier to do. Thankfully, this body style is not particularly any stranger. Again, way more of these options now, which is fantastic. I love to see that. This is all the game standard as well. This hasn't got mods and stuff, so lots and lots of options for what you want. It did mean I needed to have a little bit of a tweak with the way the kind of lower grille sat, because that kind of almost has a lip of its own at the bottom, so I had to shuffle that up ever so slightly just so that it didn't sort of get stuck together, and that would then turn out to be relatively okay. We give it a little bit more front downforce as well. The front downforce wasn't as big a concern. If anything, I didn't want to go too crazy with the front downforce. If I started from the front end turning too well, we then have problems with the rear end perhaps not behaving itself, and that is, or as I said, yeah, if we've got the front end turning in really well and the rear end still lacking grip, problems occur, basically. So, you know, there we go. Despite taking off the traction control and all those stuff, we actually managed to get the car back to being very, very competitive in the muscle premium section. The downforce helped a lot. The tyres also helped a lot. Now, it did affect the car's top speed a smidge. It put it down from 200 miles an hour, 205 to 181, which is a little bit of a shame. Actually, the tyres improved the 0 to 60 time to sub 4 seconds. Hopefully, the hope was all of this stuff done to the car would be enough to make it that little bit more usable. So here is the new and improved version, hopefully improved, that's for sure. Visually, pretty, well, I say pretty similar, that was the plan. I wanted to keep it looking as it was because I was pleased with how it looked. We've got a front splitter for that little, hopefully that little bit more downforce at the front. I mean at the back, I've managed to cheat and hide the wing as much as possible behind the brake light. You don't actually notice that it's there whatsoever. I mean, the biggest difference are, of course, going to be the tyres here. The tyres are massive on this car. There is no real way to show those semi-slick tyres off very easily, but very big tyres. They're as grippy as we can get. Hope is it'll be good to drive. This handling course should be a pretty good test for the car. Now we have taken off all of the driver aids because, well, they were pretty useless beforehand, so now I've just got rid of them completely. So there is no ABS. I'm hoping the brakes won't overheat. It is still a possibility. There were ceramic brakes at the front before, so yeah, there is a chance we may still get some rather warm brakes going on, and I've got to be careful not to lock the car up too much. So, handling characteristic wise, still quite oversteery. It is still keen to get sideways. Now there is just a lot more grip in general. I mean, we're taking these corners with a lot more speed than we were beforehand. A little bit more confident in the car putting the power down. We actually got airtime across that crest, where I don't think we did before. So, I mean, it is a dramatic change. Is what I had hoped for. It's now actually it's usable, but it's still kind of that savage. It's still got that savage performance that will give you grief if you ask a little bit too much of it. We're going to get some more sidewaysness, are we? Possibly around it. Don't crash into the other prototype. They would not be happy back at the factory if we managed to do that one. Yeah, it has had a profound effect on the way the vehicle drives, I am pleased to say. That snappiness is still gonna get it in trouble at some point. We have a skid pad, I guess, kind of area. I don't even know. I don't know what half the testing facilities are around this track. Oh, that's like a shortcut. I mean, I was going to try and go off the main track because I wanted to test out the brakes. So on this short layout, you don't ever really get to a point where the brakes are in trouble. Because you're not really going fast enough and braking for long enough. So let's head out onto the main. So this is the main automation test circuit. It's a pretty big track that you can run the cars around. Now I'm going to be careful with the brake locking on Beam. I always find is a bit weird. I'm used to driving with ABS off in just about every game I play. However, on this one, the brake locking is, I don't know why it is. I'm probably not the only one. It's just like, I think it's the percentage of brake needed to start locking everything up is so small. I'm used to like 80%, 90% brake trigger movement being okay, and this, like 50% is really starting to push what you can and can't get away with. So I will probably still lock the brakes up quite a lot around here. So, I mean, this track we are now dealing with a lot higher speed corners. We've got a lot bigger braking zones. Can we... Oh, God, slow you down for turn one. The brakes aren't screaming enough yet. That is a good sign, because I've had a couple of... When I drove the basic version around here, it was sort of one or two big stops, and then the brakes were starting to get on the rather warm side. So, yeah, this is definitely improvement. It's still a little bit, even with all the downforce, I mean, it's kind of pretend downforce at the back, but it has had a fair amount of downforce added to the rear. Even with all of that, it can still get away from you. Of course, the sensible option would have been to make this all-wheel drive. That would have made the car at least somewhat controllable. I say somewhat, it would have made it easier controllable. But that felt like a little bit boring, not really within the spirit of this sort of car. Hence why we have stuck with the rear-wheel drive. What do we top out at? Yeah, the game reckons 180 miles an hour is possible with this new setup. Uh-oh. Well, that was a big snap. It was also at least relatively well saved. Now, do we melt the brakes here? No, it does pretty well, actually. I will give it that. That's a big stop. That's probably the highest speed stop you will do around this course. And yeah, previous times, first lap would melt brakes on cars. So this is definitely not too bad. There we go. Now they are starting to, as the front right was over, only the front right was starting to go down. Let's not forget this has got carbon ceramic brakes on it. I can't do much more with the, with the front brakes on this car to try and cool them down. So yeah, it is going to get hot. It's a 2-ton car. At the end of the day, there is a lot of weight behind this car. It's perhaps unsurprising that it would have some grief in the braking department. I suspect it would be very expensive to run, about 13 miles a gallon, which is, to be fair, this is kind of always supposed. I say it's supposed to be. This is an effectively Viper shooting brake rival. Still my take on a Viper shooting brake, basically. So 13 miles a gallon, probably not all that unreasonable for a car like this. There is somewhere around a dirt road. I suspect, funnily enough, this would not be particularly good. That's probably why, if I can find it, we'll have a go on it and see what happens. I had a feeling it was around the outside here somewhere. Well, there is certainly a dirt road. We can just do that. I can't remember how to get to it, but there certainly is one over here, as you can see. Sure, let's just sneaky teleport, as you know. That's the best way to do it. Let's see what our car might drive like on the dirt. It's got very much the wrong tyres, very much the wrong driveline. I mean, torque's good for off-roading, but kind of very much the wrong engine for this sort of stuff. Oh, yeah, okay, so it doesn't really turn. Actually, completely broke the steering as well. That was a low-speed slight bump into an Armco barrier. I mean, maybe we don't show that to the testing authorities that it broke something important. I can't actually remember what suspension this thing's on. I think it's just double wishbone all round. It might be. Might have got. No, I think it was just that. I don't think it had anything fancier. I don't think I was going to. Like one of these cars, I started building it, and I didn't really expect much from it, and it's just kind of turned out to be one of my favourite ones I've done. I'm not sure my diff is enjoying this this track. I mean, it is making it. It's just making it not very dramatically. It's just all of the power, all of the noise, all of the bluster, and not really much of the going forward, because I can't make it go forward much faster. So we can either go continuing up the mountain. I don't even know where this goes. Does it take us around the... I don't even know. Oh god, it takes us around to the dam. Oh, look at this. Beautiful, beautiful concrete. Takes us onto the dam. No, don't lose the back end. Dear god. Even with a slightly better... You know what? I guess we'll finish off by... We've got to crash test it somehow. We're on Beam. I feel like that's an important part. Even with the improvements, it's still quite a savage car. It is now a lot more drivable. It will take no prisoners, though. I like that about it. But it does not take any prisoners. This definitely is, I think, my favourite car I've ever built on this game. It looks great. I would absolutely have one. If I could, I would love... I'm a big fan of estate cars, big fan of shooting brakes, and this one is glorious. Let's go and see how well the car can fly. It didn't really get itself positioned very well on that. To the road, please make it. No, No, you're not going to make it. You're going to be about a few centimetres short. The engine is hydro-locked. The car is at the bottom of the reservoir. Shall we try again? Okay, so the trigger's going to be like just inch over the edge here, because we're going to need all the speed we can get, which means wheels on the ground for as long as possible. Here we go. Right, and maybe we fire it a little bit to the left. There we go. I'm sure it'll survive this. There's no way the car's braking from this impact. That only lost a wheel. It's fine. I'm sure that would pass all the... In fact, it's still drive as well. That definitely would have passed all the Euro NCAP ratings. Not sure what's glitched out at the back. What bit of the bodywork that's supposed to be, but... everything is fine. Nothing to see here. It's going to be it for this video. Thank you all very much for watching, and until next time, a goodbye.